I'm here with Mark Gasparotto, and it is, what is it, July
Look,
20, 23rd?
sure.
Mark hails from Ontario.
Yes.
Whereabouts in Ontario?
In Ottawa.
Ottawa, okay, all right. I've actually been to Ottawa. Not too many other places, but yeah.
Actually, the number of folks I meet from BC who have never visited Ottawa is it's striking.
It's pretty sad. But Mark is here today, and he is speaking to my Emerging Leaders group. It's actually our last session, Module 12. And tell me a little bit about you, though, because Mark has a fascinating story about his experience in Kandahar when he was a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. So just give us a little bit of an overview of your role, what you were doing,
Sure.
and when that was, and what sorts of stuff was going on over there.
So I'm trained as an engineer. I went to Waterloo, then joined the Army and soldiered for 20 plus years as a combat engineer.
Okay.
And that took me around the world, places like Bosnia, Afghanistan, and Haiti. And I had one combat tour, and that was my time in Kandahar, which really forms the basis for the story that I tell as part of this inner game workshop.
Okay.
So I commanded a squadron of 135 soldiers, sailors, and airmen.
Wow.
So it was a composite squadron, had all sorts of capabilities in it, heavy equipment, mapping, bomb disposal, and then all the skills that a combat engineer would have, mainly around demolitions and constructing of obstacles. And so we would allow friendly forces to live, move, and fight on the battlefield.
Wow.
And it was a highly complex, not just, it was a highly complex environment, not just from a train perspective, but also from a cultural perspective. And we were very much strangers in a strange land. And so trying to understand as a Westerner what was going on in the hearts and minds of the people, I would say was our greatest challenge, and one that I'm not sure how well we rose to that challenge. Tactically, technically, we were very good. Culturally, room for improvement.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine would have been fairly challenging times in that kind of environment, being thrown into that. And I'm going to guess there probably wasn't a huge amount of training around, what to expect from a cultural perspective and all that sort of thing, because you were there to get a job done, right?
We did have cultural training.
Okay.
But as a Westerner, it very much the culture was alien. And that's not meant to be judgmental on that culture. It's just from trying to relate, very difficult, despite the fact that you may have been given a few hours, a few days of cultural sensitivity training.
So tell me, outside the wire, how does your experiences in Kandahar as a part of that, what's the word when we go on a mission like that?
Yes.
Mission. How does that tie back into business and leaders, and what's the connection? Tell me a little bit about that connection.
Well, I think that leadership is leadership. It's just the context that changes, or how extreme that environment. So in combat, things become quite pure in the sense that a few things matter greatly, and there's a lot of things that don't matter as much. Whereas when you're at home or in a business environment or in a non-combat environment, things aren't as pure.
Okay.
So I tell you that because some people can't relate to my story of combat, and my point to them is these are all the same principles. It's just how you apply them contextually. So outside the wire is a metaphor for when we would leave the confines of the camp, usually surrounded by wire. So we would leave what was protected and go into a place where you now become vulnerable, right? Bit of the Wild West.
Yeah.
So I use that as a metaphor for taking individuals and teams out of their comfort zone. So outside the wire is a leadership development program that I put together, and a team building experiential venture that takes them outside of their comfort zone, but yet does so in a safe to learn
Okay.
Environment. So they can experiment with all of these principles of leadership just in a different classroom, in a military-inspired classroom. But we can also really pressure test the team and put them under, the constraints of time and ambiguity to see how they solve problems. And what we notice is when you introduce some challenge, or even a little bit of physical suffering.
Yeah.
Now, it's not suffering on the scale of what a soldier would find suffering, but for many folks who are not used to that environment, they're uncomfortable. You really start to see their true nature come out, right? So it's less about how physically hard it is. It's actually more emotionally hard for people to operate in that environment, and we see their true colors. And then we can work with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell me, this Outside the Wire program sounds fascinating. Whereabouts do you run these? And maybe go a little bit deeper into the sorts of things that you do as a part of these programs. Sounds really cool.
Thank you. So we have an exportable version.
Okay.
And in fact, I'm doing one tomorrow here in the Lower Mainland for a company. And think of it as a outdoor escape room combined with a geocache, combined with an obstacle course, combined with a murder mystery, all within a mission context. And we have multiple teams that all have to collaborate, understanding the problem. And so can they extract the signal from the noise, which is an everyday issue. When you think of your business, you are likely drowning in data and yet starving for insights. And so we create an environment where people can play with that idea. And so they've got to come together and collaborate to solve a problem. That's Outside the Wire in its most basic form. However, if you want to step it up, you can come to a tactical training venue that we have in Ontario.
Cool. Yeah.
Either there's a tank museum just outside of Toronto, a place called Oshawa, or there's a training ground owned by a couple of ex-Special Forces officers, and they train police, Army, Special Forces, close protection operatives. But I have access to that site, and so I can take corporate teams into an environment where we can introduce them to live fire shooting. We can actually bring in the tanks.
Okay.
If you're a defense company, you can deploy the gear that you build, and we'll integrate that into the exercise so you can develop empathy for the end user of your product. So I can take the experiential learning part of it to quite a high level, hyper realistic in a sense, and really pressure test those teams in field conditions.
Yeah.
And so there's either a corporate retreat version of that where you come and the learning's more implicit, you're there for an experience, or you can come for what I call my leadership training camp, where it really is boot camp and beyond, leadership development, team building in a military-inspired classroom.
Man, this sounds super fun. Sign me up.
We're gonna get you out in October.
Absolutely, yeah. So how can people get a hold of you?
So my email is probably the easiest.
Yep.
So mark@gasparotto.co, or you can check me out. All of the things I've just talked about and more are on my website at gasparotto.co.
Okay.
And it's certainly wonderful to be within the tech community. And I've grown so much as a leader and as a business person, as a person, by virtue of me being in this wonderful community. So, Chris, I thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Fantastic to hear you today. And we should probably get back into the program.
Okay.
That 9 minutes, I think, is gone. So thank you very much for being here today. And it's really great to meet you. Look forward to visiting your facility later this year. Fun times ahead.